individual is going to be most important in terms of driving innovation in the organisation. I've got to, as a someone who's a supporter of marketing and B2B particularly, I've got to say the marketer, and I'm not just saying that because I'm being loyal, I'm saying that because I genuinely believe it, and I think that you're seeing increasing evidence of through studies like ones that were done by IBM both this year and before, about the role of the opportunities that are open to marketers, particularly on the back of cloud computing, which is moving stuff away from the pipes element of it, these kind of technology discussion, to put the power in charge of the marketer. And the new technology that's coming through allows marketers to do much, much more interesting things and be much more flexible. And they have to be, because there's much more competition going on. So marketing for me can, should, and could be, not in that order, in the box seat in terms of driving the organisation forward, and that's really our remit in terms of, we believe that marketing is the business of business, and it's got to be playing a really important role, and marketers got to stand up and be counted in that respect. So,
okay,
marketing, I think.
Nicola, do you have a view on that at all?
Yeah, I think for us it's the fact that marketing has become much more measurable over the past few years. So for us, it's, they're allowing them to go to their CEO and the C-suite to say, actually, I can measure what I'm doing, instead of getting that sales pressure for those leads. It's actually saying, I can now prove that that's a qualified good lead.
You think that now that things are measurable, it's easily translatable into the language of the CFO and the CEO, for example.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that plays to the point, Andrew, that you were talking about in terms of that level of language that you use with different communities.
Yeah, I think the language won't go away that the C-suite uses about business objectives and outcomes. All this new stuff is coming over the hill, so we need someone to translate that. Or, as I said before, the other question, we need maybe the C-suite to upskill. We don't need them to be Twitter czars, but we need them to understand. I was at an event a few weeks ago where the CEO of a retail brand was there, and he said, I know enough to be dangerous because someone came to me asking for a $2 million AdWords spend. And I knew what they were talking about and what the impacts were. But I think we've got people that are hitting the C-suite and asking them to sign off on these things. They have no idea what they're talking about. And they kind of sign them off going, well, sounds right, if they just knew a little bit more. So maybe we need to mentor the C-suite, reverse mentor, and actually give them understanding of what it is that we're asking them.
Interesting. So that's C-suite within your business, but I mean, many of the people in the room are selling their products to the C-suite in their customers' businesses. Is social media really relevant for those kind of conversations? John?
I think that's a very, very important question at the moment, and I think that what you're seeing is a gradual transition that we're going through. Increasingly, there's all this conversation about digital natives, and they clearly are on social media. They all are. They, as the name suggests, that's where they belong. The rest of us, and I get myself definitely in that camp, what are we? And I've been trying to work out what we are, and I think we had a conversation about this last night at a dinner we were at, and my preferred choice was digital refugee, because I think that we're kind of hiding from somewhere. Someone else suggested digital fugitive, which is a bit more dangerous, but I think it could potentially apply. And I think what you're seeing is a transition from these people who, at the moment, it's the digital refugees who are in control, who are making the decisions on the whole, not always and exclusively, but they're gradually, as was discussed by Andrew earlier on, they're gradually ultimately moving on and dying out, essentially. So there's going to be a gradual handover of power. So as that process continues, you're going to see social media becoming more and more resonant. But I do think there remains a lot of cynicism about it at the moment.
Nicola, from your experience of working with many brands, you seeing any traction? Are marketers coming to you saying, I must be doing this?
I think they are, but I think it's what Andrew touched on earlier. They think that they have to do it. Mm-hmm. What they're not actually doing is stepping back and looking at the prospects and who they're talking to and where exactly they are in the social space. And that's a big challenge we have. We have clients saying, we need a Facebook community, but let's take a step back. What are they consuming? They are consuming video. How are we going to get that out to them? If they are on LinkedIn, what are they doing on LinkedIn? Because we've also got to look at the prospect and the influencer network. Mm-hmm. And I think it's just taking that step back and understanding what our true objectives are and where these people are.
Because that's critical. You mentioned the influencer network. The average B2B buying process will contain 10 or 12 individuals that are part of that, and we're, as marketeers, we're focused very much on the IT decision maker. Never mind the person that starts the research process and the person in the business unit that IT is going to support. So what ways do you see of using digital as an example to actually target that influencer community?
Yeah, so it all depends. So it goes back to just basics of, looking at them, looking at persona work that we do and thinking, okay, if we're going to push, we use a lot of content. So if we're going to push content out, we're going to use it across social spaces. How do we do that? How do we get traction? And often what we're trying to do, especially in the B2B space, is get them onto social channels. Mm-hmm. So we're pushing content out initially to get them to engage through us, and that will be them setting up Twitter accounts, setting up LinkedIn.
But on that, sorry, Joe, I'll come to you in a moment. I've got a point.
Yeah.
But on that, do you really think that your customers at the C-level are on social media channels, or are you just helping these companies get up there and speaking to nobody?
Probably a bit of both. It depends what industries they're in. You have to look at that as well, because some industries, they will naturally be within social media spaces. But if you look at, we've just done a bit of research on facilities management and, we have to do a video, have to do this. But if you look at that set, they don't consume video like, for example, CIOs do. Mm-hmm. So it's just taking it on its head and just understanding who you're talking to.
People say, well, the C-suite aren't on social, so why bother?
Yeah.
But their one down are, because their one down are really, wanting to further their careers, and they need to do the research. So you're only ever 1 degree away from someone who is active on social. So I would never dismiss it, because the person who's advising the C-suite, their 2IC, their person who's their head of department or whatever, they're going to them saying, what do you think, Nicola? Yeah. And Nicola's saying, well, I just read this great article. They don't have time to read it, but their team do.
Mm-hmm. Great point. Sorry, Joel.
I think I agree with all that, and I think back to Nicola's point about content. Social media is a distribution. One of the ways it's relevant in the social business world is as distributor of content, and I think so for me, its primary role is as a channel to consume information, and in whatever format is relevant to the individual. Maybe they like apps, maybe they like video, maybe they like infographics or white papers or whatever it might be. They'll find that way of doing it, and they'll access that content through whatever channel it might be. It might be on Vine or something like that. And there's three, but that's one way which social business is relevant. The other way is, Andrew talked about internally and communicating your brand and making sure people understand everyone's on message and gearing up to all the things they need to do. And the other way is obviously tracking what's being said about you externally. So there's three different ways in which social business is relevant, but the content, in terms of the revenue generation, it's the content distribution that's key.
Okay, great. Any questions from the floor? I have a millennial at the back of the room.
Careful, that might be ageist. Pete Jacob from Purple Salix. Picking up on Joel's point about, digital refugees and digital fugitives, I wonder whether there might be a new category, which is, if you like, digital fundamentalists, which is kind of like, assuming no matter what the question, the answer is digital. And I think we've had a couple of examples of tonight where I just question whether we can sometimes over-egg it. So one area would be this whole space of, at some point, there is a handoff to a human being who needs to engage, have a conversation, etc. And I wonder also, another area I'd be particularly keen to hear Andrew's views, particularly with his cred experience, is in this whole area of social influence, where I wonder, to what extent do you think influence and digital influence are the same thing? In other words, how much influence is really still offline?
Yeah. I get the question all the time when I was CEO of cred, what's your street cred versus your online cred? And the two can be very different. So I think when you look at online cred, you are skewing towards who actually is online. And in fact, what I would always say is that influence measurement online is in its infancy, and it's still not perfect, and people game the system, but it can actually help you do some quick research to say, well, of all these people in this segment, who is more likely to be interesting to me? And it might be that the offline cred, your street cred, is very much harder to measure. I know people that will never be on social network, but they're incredibly influential. The problem is, though, that human beings like lists. So if you have the independent top 100 influential people, you're never going to agree, even if it's an offline measure, that someone is influential or not. The fact that Pippa Middleton seems to be influential. In fact, no, the Evening Standard said that Prince George was the most influential person in London. And I would challenge that, because I don't know that he'd be a great brand ambassador right now. He's just being christened, unless it's in baby christening clothes. But I think The problem is that people take these numbers and they take them at face value and they don't actually look at behind what the numbers are. And the challenge is I would deal with agencies all the time who would say, well, if Andrew has a higher cred score than George, then should we deal with him? But it might be in the wrong area. So it's about education as well. So to your digital fundamental, where the answer is always digital, I'm a digital purist, but my answer is not always digital. It's what is your business objective? And if we can solve it through digital, great. If we need to use traditional methods or combine the two, that's also, but I'm more of a pragmatist. Maybe it's because I'm a bit older than the millennials or what about digital terrorists who say you must use digital? Maybe there's another market segment there.
Excellent.
I have to ask this question. A well-known British listed airline comes to mind. They truly upset my partner the other week. But they seem to have taken everything you have on the panel there and turned it upside down regarding their approach to customers. And my question is, how do they manage to go and do that, yet double their share price in a year?
Well, I'm completely at a loss of understanding financial markets and why shares go up and down, because I've never managed to back the right one yet. But
I've got to have a stab at it, at this. I mean, I guess that one of the reasons airlines prices go up is because of the price of fuel, but that's a slightly separate point to this, and the general economy really, and the travel bans you have with businesses. Personally, I'm a bit more sceptical about than Andrew is, and perhaps I'm a journalist. I'm paid to be a cynic, but I'm a bit sceptical about the power of social media to actually and customer service. Having had 3 examples where I've tried really hard to get people to actually respond to what it was I wanted, to some genuine grievances I've had, and each time it's failed, with a mixture of B2B and B2C companies, and maybe I'm just not trying hard enough, or I'm just not as compelling in my my negativity. So, I think the social is compelling, but I think that clearly there's an offline economy which still matters, and when people want to fly, there are enough people who will ignore the bad vibes and just go with the brands that they trust, because airlines are about safety and reliability, I suppose, in those respects. That would be my guess.
okay. Thank you. Next question, please. One in the middle here.
Hi, Louis Fernandez from SAS. One of the things that you've all touched on, or certainly Andrew, you did, was big data. And we talk about big data, it's become very buzz-termy. How do you actually get any value from it? What are your views on how you extract that value, analyse it, and actually get that into an operational environment? One of the things you've said right at the top of the blurb for tonight was the most important thing is to forecast where customers are moving. So how are you going to do that?
Well, I think big data is a huge opportunity, but the challenge has been, until fairly recently, computing power hasn't been there to actually make sense of it all, because it's just so rich. What we do as a business is that's what we do. We go and analyse big data and make sense of it, and there's technologies to do that. But then you need the people analysing to understand whether it's good big data or bad big data, because you can skew anything. But I think what I've seen in the business I was in before and what I'm doing now at IBM is that is a question that can be solved through technology. But you then have to train the people looking at that to actually understand where they go with that, because big data can actually lead you in the wrong direction if you want to. But to the point before about complaining on social media, that isn't a big data problem. That's a fundamental issue with the business. They're not putting customers at the heart of it. If they did, they would use all the weaponry available, social, big data, focus groups. They would do that to make the experience better. So yes, big data is a buzzword. And in a few years' time, it'll just be called data, just as social will be dropped. I was fortunate enough to sit in an audience in 2000 with Nicholas Negroponte in Sydney when e-business was big. In fact, IBM owned the term e-business back then. And he said, mark my words, in a few years' time, we'll just be talking about business. And we are. So I think social would drop, because at the moment, no disrespect to journalists, you like to put the word social in front because people understand it. But it's just media. It's just data. They're just customers.
See, that's a really interesting point, because you say that it's just business. But in your survey, I think it was only 36% of the companies you surveyed have a joint digital and physical strategy. That should just be strategy.
I agree with you, but we need to label it right now so we understand there are different ways to attack the problem, because you deal with a physical strategy in a different way to a digital. Mm-hmm. But if we're meeting again in 20 years' time, we will not be, it will be completely, it's not there yet, because guess what? It's hard.
Do you want I think I agree with what you just said. In regard to the big data question, I was at an event recently where I think the big data has a huge amount of potential, and there's probably a lot of companies in the B2C world that are starting to exploit it. In the B2B world, there was an event recently where somebody used the word guff in relation to big data, and I really think it's a really appropriate word, because big data is not on the radar in B2B. It's data is a problem, not big data. They're nowhere near dealing with all this enormous wealth of social and whatever forms and resources that you've got. They're actually trying to deal with the fundamental marketing data and get that right, because 30% of your data erodes every year, and the progressive ones are dealing with things like marketing automation, but that's only about 25% of the market. So therefore, I don't think B2B big data is on the radar. That's not to say that if it was, it couldn't be really effective, but I just don't think they're there yet.
Yeah.
I think, so give you another example. So I agree B2B, it's not as important just yet, because they don't know they've actually got big data in their own organization. Every time you do a transaction, every time there's a you'll have big data about everything. Completely different example. In the US, the LA Police Department worked with, I think it was one of the universities there, and they looked at 80 years of crime data and put it all together. They then built models to predict where crime is going to occur next. And they tested this. They actually said to patrol officers, in your 12-hour window, we want you to just go to these areas a bit more often than the other. And crime reduction, 26%, because they were starting to predict it. They use what's called the aftershock theory. You can't always predict an earthquake, but once the earthquake has happened, you can predict the aftershocks. So they use big data and 80 years of crime figures to solve crime. How can you translate that into your business with all the data you have? And big data is not just social. It's any touch you have that you can actually quantify or tag, whether it be a footfall visit or a customer complaint or someone putting something in the suggestion box. 100,000 suggestions in a suggestion box, that's big data. How do you codify that and make sense of it, though?
Nicola, what are your views in terms of the way you're working with clients? Are they hungry for data, or do they just want you to cut through the...
Data's everything, and I think when it comes to social, it's very different. Our clients are used to data looks like, oh, we've got a job title, we've got a name, we've got a segment, we know what they are. What they're really trying to struggle with is when we go into social, how do we collect that data? They say, but we don't know anything about them. So it's not seen as a valuable, record for those guys. I think what we are, and B2B is so in its infancy still with social. It's really unbelievable. It really is in its infancy. And I went to an event just so I could work with the marketing team on their Twitter feed for the day. And out of all the 25 stands there was only 2 stands tweeting. And it was very, very light, it's still very...
So, it's a great illustration, but to Joel's point, B2B companies need to get their customer databases right first. I was speaking with a client that was rather proudly telling me they'd got it down to 8 customer databases.
Wow. They're still struggling with
I dread to think where they started.
CRM,
Yeah, absolutely. Next question, please. There's one over here.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Marius. I work at Lloyd's Banking Group. My question is, do you think that it's right for companies in a way to positively discriminate those customers who shout the loudest online and complain publicly and say, just like you, Andrew, got a free iPad from EE, which I think is great, but then if there were 10,000 other customers who had the same problem and didn't even get an apology, and they were to find out, that say you got a free iPad, and they would probably be quite motivated to start shouting themselves, and it can all go downhill quite quickly, I think, from there. So do you think it's really the right long-term strategy for companies to discriminate positively customers effectively?
So let me answer in a different way. My EE iPad experience helped them solve a process problem that may have taken months. In 3 days they solved it. So there will probably be less people tweeting about that because the problem has been fixed. Now you work for a bank, and banks and telcos and utilities make mistakes. So maybe initially you need to understand these people tweeting about this bad thing. Let's learn from that. You're right, long term you can't have that. But long term you need to fix the systemic problems. And if the problems go away, you won't have people tweeting bad things. So the challenge is, how do you work out whether this particular person, this Andrew Grill person, is he useful to the business? Is he, they didn't know me from a bar of soap when the tweets came through. Like I said, they were very lucky because I knew what I was doing and I actually wanted to help them. If I'd been some other nasty blogger, I could have gone to the Daily Mail and really made a really hard to slog for them. So to answer your question, it can't be long term, but you can use the short hits that you get to actually improve the process and make it better so that people don't complain.
No, actually, Joel, I'll let you speak for a change. No.
My only point I was going to say is you haven't got any choice. It's not right. It shouldn't be like that. But you haven't got any choice, because if you don't do that, if you don't overcompensate, they're not going to go away. And you've got to do it right. And the classic case studies are almost 10 years old. The United Brakes Guitars and Dell Hell, where they actually really serious damage to those organisations' share prices, and the organisations refused to engage with them and said and assumed these guys would go away, and they didn't. And then when they had to put it right, it was so difficult. There's no choice.
But United Brake Guitars wasn't about social media. This is a guy called Dave Carroll, who I've actually met. And so what happened is that United, he was in his aircraft, he looked out the window, and someone was throwing his guitar case on the ground and it broke. He rang, not social, he rang United and said, what are you going to do about this? Basically, that was the response that he got for 9 months. He said, okay, I'm going to write 3 songs about you. The first one's called United Brakes Guitars, and it was a huge hit. My point there is, social wasn't actually involved. If they'd fixed the problem in that first interaction and someone had been empowered to. Years ago, I worked with Vodafone in Australia, and their call centre agents had the power and authority to refund up to $500 on the spot. And same with social media. So they could fix the problem there and then. And so by empowering your employees, it's nothing to do with social media, make the problem go away.
No, but the amplification with social media, wasn't it?
But only amplified because they ignored him.
Yeah, absolutely. So
and the $180 million off their share price is something you should notice.
Moving swiftly on. Next question, please. Yes, one on the edge. Thank you.
Hello. Is this working? Yeah.
Yep.
Hello, I'm the one on the end. My name's Chris Reeve. I'm the marketing manager for Walters Kluwer. I suppose I was just listening to this and just thinking of a few points because of what we've done with the business, what I've done with the business. A couple of words that have come out. You mentioned, Andrew, qualification once, which I think is quite profound. And I hate to lower the tone, but sales hasn't been mentioned once. And to take the point that the gentleman said over there, what we found in our experiences, and certainly I've found in my personal experiences, if we talk about sales, and probably I'm coming from actually Joel's point of view, and I tend to scrutinize an awful lot, probably too much so. But in my experience working with sales, what they want is not necessarily leads, they want orders. If you present orders, everybody's happy. And what I found with digital, the way that we've used it in social media, and particularly what Andrew said about qualification, and what you said in your presentation about communicating it to higher management, it's communicating the fact that these are highly qualified leads. Rainy days, umbrellas. It's as simple as that. With mentioning a number of times here, we've mentioned about moments of truth, where the individual at that point is going to buy. And we need to communicate that more. I spend quite a lot of my time when I'm building campaigns communicating that through. And sometimes you have to dramatize it. And the only one I can think of that I constantly say is it's rather like being car salesmen. One level of qualification is getting them on the forecourt. They've opened the email. The second level of qualification is they've downloaded the white paper. Oh, they're looking at the car. They're going to look around the car. Next thing is they've actually put in their lead through salesforce.com. Can you give me a quote? Well, they've opened the door. I mean, if you're explaining that throughout the business, over to you, you know. I mean, it's the digital gives us so many opportunities to qualify. It's incredible. And in some ways, it's just trying to hang it all together. But I'm still learning every day. So
hence the reason why you're here tonight. Thank you.
Exactly.
That's a great question. Maybe Nicola, I can hand this over to you.
Absolutely, and I think that's the big thing with B2B as well, because that's what they're interested in. They're interested in sales. You know, when we actually talk to our stakeholders, they want sales, and they can't see that coming from other channels other than directly. So we're talking, you know, email lead gen, you know, even things like direct mail, we can attribute sales to. You know, can we attribute sales to, you know, building up communities? You know, that's the big question we get asked all the time. You know, are they going to put their marketing budget, you know, and how much will that be into building communities? Because with B2C, it is more about brand awareness. You know, they are happy to engage. They know, you know, we're talking big volumes as well. And, you know, from a B2B perspective, some people have databases of a couple of thousand. You know, some of them we have hundreds of thousands. So, you know, it's all relative.
Joel, do you have any thoughts on the variance between a marketing qualified lead and a sales qualified lead? There's this kind of juxtaposition there, isn't there?
Thank you so much for that question, Richard. I guess the answer is that every company's got to work it out for themselves, and that's the wonderful journey that you'll go on when you all implement marketing automation. And it's a tricky process, and it continually evolves. And if you get it right, then it does seem like it can do a very good job for you. But if you can't, then it's going to be very, very difficult. But yeah, it is all about the money, and the key difference in B2B and B2C is the sales team. That's it. There's lots of talk about what constitutes, what's the differences, and it's down to the marketing relationship with sales and how they get on together and how they can work together. And ultimately, marketers in B2B have got to demonstrate revenue. They've got to show pipeline. If they can't do that, then they're going to be out of a job really fast.
And I think there's going to be a challenge there with marketing automation because, I think, we've done a good job of bringing marketing and sales together a lot, but now we're all going into marketing automation. Are those leads going to get slower? So I was having a conversation with someone earlier because, we didn't used to nurture leads like we do now, and sales used to get leads, and it was all about numbers. My sales team are sitting, all these numbers of appointments, but now marketing is saying, yeah, but I can qualify them for you. Isn't it great? But they'll get less appointments through. So I think that's going to be a big battle. Sales is still saying, yeah, that's great, but I might have a long buying process time, and there might be 2 years before I make a sale, but I'm getting less leads and they're coming through less slower because their score's not met the sales ready, lead time. So I think, over the next 12 months it's going to be interesting to see how sales and marketing handle that relationship going forward.
And just picking up that, taking that a little bit further, the idea of everything becoming tighter, everything becoming more measurable. Do you think that this drive for everything has to have an ROI or a ROAS or something is inhibiting or slowing down innovation in marketing?
I don't think so. I think it's always been there, don't you, Joe, in a way in B2B? I think it's always the C-suite have always had a big influence on that. It is about money, but it is about qualification as well. And I think the difference is the fact that marketing are getting a lot more involved in it now, whereas it used to be a lot about sales.
I completely agree that it has always been there, and I think that for me the challenge right now is that marketers have got to focus on, B2B marketers have got to focus on doing what they know works, so they can see it's works, they've done it before and it's quantifiable, it's measurable, and it's going to meet the sales team. And then doing that experimentation piece, which often involves digital natives and getting those guys on board. And I thought that was a revelation until someone last night told me that's called the Coke rule. And it's been around for about 40 years. So nothing ever changes. It's all the same as it ever was. Yeah. And you've just got to keep experimenting. But I think experimentation is at the fore now because of all the newish anyway, techniques and technologies and routes to market we've all got.
So quick show of hands in the room of how many of you have got a part of your budget or resources that you allocate to testing and learning and experimentation? Okay, so probably only 10 or 15% actually.
Could you ask them how many people have actually got people allocated to experimentation? Social, it's about people, it's about throwing people at things rather than necessarily budget. So that might be the resource side of things. So sorry. Would you like to answer that?
Absolutely, I'd love to answer that. I thought I'd covered that by budgets and resource.
Sorry.
But, okay. So anyway, so we've got people that are dedicated to and it's the same hands. Okay, thank you.
Sorry.
Thanks, John. I've got a job for you. There's a question in the corner there.
Graham Story, William Data Systems. The last 5 minutes I've been hearing as if there's two warring factions called marketing and sales, and may they meet on the rugby pitch. Anybody who's going to be doing digital marketing and improving the bottom line profitability needs to have the two working like two sides of the coin. And I spend probably 25% of my time becoming the servant of the salespeople, because the salespeople do not understand digital marketing. They'll arrange their social lives, but they don't understand half the things that we as marketeers can deliver for them to let them do their job better. And we've been talking here about a lot of techniques, and this maybe is one of these personal techniques where if you can actually work closer with your sales function, and that means right the way up to the board, you'll be surprised how then budget can be loosened, because what you're asking for is something that you're then showing them is achievable.
And on that bombshell, that's I'm not sure.
I think if the question is marketers need to work very close together with sales, absolutely right. Sometimes it's easier said than done.
But I think you used the term. I've jotted this down. That you're providing. I've written down slave to sales. I may be misquoting you there. But again, earlier we were talking about how the CMO should be driving innovation and being the focal point for the business and driving that forward. So there's a real conflict there, don't you think?
I think there is. I think there is a lot more involvement on both sides. They've both got an agenda, and I think they know that the best way to solve that is through working together. It depends. Every business is different. I've got 70% of my clients where the sales director will be in every marketing meeting, and it's a breath of fresh air, but then we are talking about numbers. But then you've got the other 30% where you've got a sales team that don't want to know the leads that marketing are providing. They're rubbish leads. I can get my own leads. I don't need them. And you've got a whole cultural change there. And it's being accountable, really.
The newish word for marketing being the slave of sales seems to be sales enablement. So it's what a lot of so it's a whole new type of stuff that people do that actually helps the sales team do their job, and it allows marketing to do it in a way that makes it sound like it's more interesting than producing brochures. But I guess it's kind of the same thing. Maybe someone will tell me that I'm wrong. I'm not sure.
I think we're out of time now, so please join me in thanking our panellists. Thank you very much indeed. Absolutely fascinating discussion. And maybe what I could do just in a brief second or so is give a quick wrap-up of the takeouts that I've taken from today. You may find this useful. You may just want to go and have a drink. So Andrew started off by telling us it's about time we grew up. That's what he did. He grew up and came into a big corporate to show a big corporate how startups act and react. And I think there's some lessons there for all of us. Don't necessarily just think about the way that you're doing things today. Think about what your customers are doing. Put the customer at the heart and make sure that you're bringing that change into the business as well. The CXOs, the CEOs, they're really compelled to listen to their customers today. It's absolutely critical that they understand what those customers want, what they actually want to bring them into the business, both in terms of business strategy, but also product development across all areas. One really interesting thing for me to take out is that customer expectations are increasing while tolerance is decreasing. And I think that's just amplified in digital, but it's something that is pervading everything that we do in every interaction. So we need to be really cognizant of that and understand what that means to our customers and the business. We need to speak the right language, speak the same language when we're going up to board level, put it in their terms. It's almost the currency to get at the table, at the board table. So just think about that. How do you do that? Don't go and talk about clicks and likes and plus ones and all of those sorts of things. Talk about engagement factors. Talk about revenue driving. Talk about the things that really matter to that audience. And I love this phrase of beware of the Twitter tax. And I think that's a really interesting thing. It's about don't blame the fact that your processes are broken on the social media outcome. Think about how you need to solve those processes by using digital and social media to help you highlight what those processes are. We then moved on to the panel, and I think we reached the conclusion that the CMO has the opportunity to drive innovation. So if the CMO has that opportunity, where is he or she going to get those ideas from? It's from the rest of the marketing team. It's about democratizing innovation and allowing anyone within a team to come up with a great idea and see that forward. We talked a little bit about digital refugees, digital fugitives, that's it, and then digital fundamentalists. I love that. That was great. And it's not necessarily that it's the C-suite that are using all of these digital platforms. A lot of them are, but all of their number twos, all of their second in charges are doing it. The people that they are going to get the influence from are doing this. So it's really important to influence the influencer. My God, I feel like I've been saying that phrase for years. I probably have. And really interesting, there's a difference between your online credibility and your street cred. And for me, how do companies actually bring that aligned? because a company wants to have that same interaction and that same brand experience with you, whether that's online or offline, through a call center, whatever it is. So understand how you're going to align that. I think that's really important. Big data is guff in B2B. Thank you for that insight. I love the fact that you use Watson to analyze research data. My God, that is a big data set. Perhaps there's some wider initiatives, global problems that Watson could also help with. And marketing needs to continue to prove the value, and that's that level of language piece. And then just finally, it's about the sales teams. Those buggers don't understand what we're trying to do. They don't understand digital. We've got a journey. We've got to bring them on that journey and help them understand how digital and how marketing as a whole can really help them. It's no longer about just taking clients or prospects for golf. It's about how do you engage across that whole buying cycle, not only through the buying cycle, but also in the second phase of once they've bought the product and customer retention as well. And whatever you do, the final thought is never be a slave to sales. So that's my very brief wrap up on that.